He was a world-class surgeon, a husband, a father. But one overheard conversation shattered everything. They thought he'd walk away broken. But instead, he walked away prepared. And what came next wasn't revenge, it was precision. The morning light spilled through the tall windows of Halston Medical Center's private surgical wing, casting long streaks across a wall lined with certificates and accolades. Dr. Nathan Drake, head of cardiovascular surgery and one of the most revered names in the country, adjusted his white coat in front of a sleek glass cabinet. At 52, he stood with practiced poise. His dark hair, now streaked with subtle silver, only added to the calm authority that had defined his career. His reflection in the cabinet's glass was surrounded by framed recognition, peer awards, breakthroughs in complex procedures, humanitarian commendations. Behind every plaque was a story of precision, sacrifice, and excellence. Nathan didn't linger on them. He never had. It wasn't the recognition that mattered, it was the work. Outside, the usual shuffle of the morning staff began. Footsteps echoed softly. Assistants moved with purpose. His schedule was full as always. At the end of the corridor, a surgical suite had been prepped for an aortic reconstruction. But before he could head there, his longtime colleague and closest friend, Elijah Boone, stepped into the locker area with an expression that didn't match his usual calm demeanor. There was a hesitation in the air. Nathan continued washing his hands at the steel basin, not acknowledging the weight behind Elijah's silence until the man finally spoke. His voice quiet and uneven. The words came slowly, carefully chosen, but the meaning landed like a dropped scalpel. There were whispers about Lena, Nathan's wife of 24 years. Whispers involving Dr. Travis Shaw, the hospital's new transplant specialist, imported with great fanfare from a clinic in Zurich. Nathan didn't flinch. His hands moved in perfect rhythm beneath the faucet. Had been married nearly a quarter of a century. They had 3 children in elite schools, a home in Highcrest Hill, and a life built on tradition, performance, and control. To entertain rumors of betrayal would be to unravel the framework of everything Head structured with surgical precision. But he knew Elijah, and Elijah never wasted words. Back at the Drake residence, Lena Blake stood in front of a vanity mirror in her walk-in dressing suite. At 47, she looked every bit the image of controlled elegance. Pilates at dawn, facials flown in from Milan, wardrobe consultations scheduled quarterly. Her routine was curated to perfection. Her phone chimed. A message flashed on the screen. Same time. Nathan's in surgery until late. She typed back quickly, her tone casual, her smile untouched by guilt. Downstairs, their twin sons, Emmer and Jasper, lounged on the leather sectional in matching uniforms from the prestigious St. Marlowe Academy. They were brilliant, poised, and driven. One was applying to Columbia's pre-med program, the other buried in an advanced statistics module. Their younger sister, Clara, came down the staircase, debate folder in hand, asking Lena to sign a tournament form. Everything looked like a normal, thriving family until you listened closely. Later that week, Nathan's schedule unexpectedly opened. A last-minute patient reschedule gave him an hour he hadn't anticipated. Instead of remaining at the hospital, he drove home, hoping to catch Lena and surprise her with lunch. As he entered the house, it was unnervingly quiet, until he heard voices behind the closed door of his private study. Years of delicate surgical training taught him how to approach silently. He paused just outside the door, barely breathing. The voices inside were unmistakable. Lena and Emmer, deep in a hushed, serious conversation. The tone was sharp, strategic, calculated. Nathan didn't recognize his wife's voice. It was cold, detached, far from the polished charm she wore at social functions. She spoke of divorce, of assets already prepared, of arrangements timed precisely with their son's college acceptance letters. She referred to the house, the cars, even the private art collection as already settled. Emmer's voice wavered, uncertain, but Lena's response was unyielding. The family name, she said, still held weight. They would ride it to the finish line. Once both boys were secured, she and Travis could step in fully. Nathan stepped back. He didn't speak. He didn't storm in or confront anyone. Instead, he walked into the cool quiet of his home office, pulled out a secure tablet, and began working. Within minutes, Head contacted Declan Hart, his former law school roommate turned elite divorce attorney in Manhattan. Then came calls to financial advisors, digital forensics experts, and a private investigator with ties to Ridgewood's security archives. His plan wasn't rage, it was precision. He retrieved a password Lena had used for years, the date of their honeymoon. Within an hour, he had access to years of correspondence. Messages with Travis, spreadsheets of hidden transactions, photos, bookings, DNA reports, everything. By morning, he'd already created a new trust, moved protected assets into legacy accounts for his children, reassigned ownership of all his medical patents to an entity outside of Lena's reach. Every file she thought deleted was already mirrored onto a secure cloud and backed up on a single USB drive left on the kitchen counter, next to his wedding band. The message was brief, typed and printed, weighted with evidence.
No acquiescents.
Just facts. And one final line, the truth, like a clean incision, leaves no infection behind. Then he was gone. The sun rose quietly over the Summit Falls Highway as Nathan Drake left behind not just a house, but a fabricated life. Ahead was nothing familiar, but what he carried now was more valuable than reputation or wealth. He carried clarity. And for a surgeon, that was everything. The road to Summit Falls cut through long stretches of untouched landscape, winding upward toward the private enclave where Nathan Drake had chosen to rebuild. Unlike the stone and glass coldness of Highcrest Hill, this place felt open, wild, even. The house he settled into was modern but modest, tucked into a slope above the tree line. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto distant peaks, and silence hung over everything like a protective veil. Nathan never once looked back at Boston. Not physically, not emotionally. There was no need. He knew Lena would find the note within hours. And with it, a carefully arranged bundle of evidence. Years of emails, bank statements, hidden DNA reports, and voice recordings recovered from internal security systems at Halston Medical Center. There was no confrontation necessary. The proof would speak louder than any argument could. And the timing, perfect, surgical, left her no room to maneuver. From the moment Nathan stepped away, he ceased being a participant in her game. Instead, he became a tactician. In the following days, he activated a network of trusted professionals, people he had kept close not out of paranoia, but principle. Each had a role. Declan Hart finalized the asset protections. Don Harper, the accountant, ensured the financial shifts were watertight. And Elijah Boone quietly passed on intel from within Halston's administration, where the aftershocks of Lena and Travis' behavior were already being felt. By the end of the week, the irrevocable trust created for Emmer, Jasper, and Clara had been fully funded. It operated independently of Nathan's estate. Nothing Lena touched could alter it. Nothing Travis could challenge in court. The public narrative remained intact. Nathan had taken a medical sabbatical. A story carefully curated, whispered among board members and hospital trustees. Burnout, stress, elite surgeon fatigue, the perfect excuse. His absence was painted as honorable, well-deserved. Meanwhile, Travis Shaw positioned himself to ascend. And Lena? She played the grieving wife, abandoned without warning, managing 3 children and a crumbling family image. But the cracks were already visible. Within a month, gossip began to trickle from Halston Medical's upper floors. Security footage had been copied anonymously and delivered to HR and legal. Short clips, silent, time-stamped, enough to raise questions about professional conduct. Embraces in locked offices. Meeting room doors closing and not reopening for over an hour. Pattern impossible to deny. And then came the interviews. Medical blogs picked up whispers first. Then national outlets. The phrase Swiss-trained began to raise eyebrows, especially when deeper credentials were called into question. A licensing anomaly here, a malpractice claim settled quietly overseas. Suddenly, Dr. Travis Shaw's resume didn't appear as airtight as Lena had once believed. Nathan, from his new headquarters in Summit Falls, watched in silence. He never commented, never engaged. but everything passed through his hands. Every document, every deposition transcript, every emailed request for comment. He wasn't orchestrating the fallout, but he wasn't stopping it either. Instead, he focused on something far more important. Pierce Health Institute opened quietly but with prestige. A private practice reserved for those who valued discretion, excellence, and personalized care. Wealthy patients flew in from across the country, CEOs, senators, philanthropists. No press releases, no waiting lists, just results. And Nathan delivered them, as he always had, with precision, control, and care. He slept better now. Not because the betrayal had faded, but because he had reclaimed what Lena and Travis had tried to strip from him. Clarity, purpose, and peace. Back in Boston, the chaos deepened. Lena's attempts to access shared accounts were met with error messages. Her calls to Don Harper were never returned. The trust attorney refused to release details. Her panic grew. She turned to Travis, but the charm was gone. His temper flared more easily now. The stress of scrutiny at the hospital, the loss of allies, the quiet disdain from colleagues. It all surfaced. Their alliance had been based on leverage and illusion. Now both were vanishing. One evening, she confronted Don Harper in his downtown office, demanding access, threatening exposure. He didn't blink. Instead, he slid a folder across the desk, copies of her own correspondence with Travis, her involvement in structuring false narratives to manipulate the divorce. "This is insurance," he said flatly. "You've already lost the war. Don't make me burn the remains." And just like that, Lena Blake understood what Nathan had truly taken from her. Not money, not status, not reputation, control. He had removed her from the operating room of their shared life and left her outside the glass, watching as her illusions fell apart piece by piece. In Summit Falls, Nathan stood before the window of his clinic, watching snow begin to fall over the mountains. He held no hatred in his chest.
No bitterness.
What Lena and Travis had done had once threatened to shatter him, but instead it had refined him. Like steel passed through flame, he had emerged sharper. Not angry, not vindictive, just precise. In the early hours before Summit Falls stirred awake, Nathan Drake sat in his office, reviewing encrypted reports from Boston. The flow of updates had become part of his routine, quiet confirmations that his absence was not abandonment, but strategy. He remained invisible, yet fully present in the lives of his children. Not through words or visits, but through preparation, protection, and quiet intervention. At their universities, the support took many forms: anonymous scholarships, private mentorship programs, behind-the-scenes referrals that led to exclusive internships and advanced academic placements. Each child, Emmer, Jasper, and Clara, moved forward believing in coincidence, never fully realizing the meticulous orchestration beneath the surface. Meanwhile, in Boston, the illusion Lena had worked so hard to maintain began to fracture. The media narrative shifted from intrigue to scandal. Coverage of the affair evolved into investigations. The medical board initiated formal proceedings. The reputation of her Swiss partner, once polished and untouchable, unraveled as buried malpractice reports surfaced. Then came the diagnosis. The cancer, aggressive and advanced, rendered all past ambitions irrelevant. It arrived like a reckoning, silent, sudden, final. She clung to familiarity, to control, to the social veneer she'd crafted. But as her condition worsened, that too began to slip. Her partner, once so devoted, disappeared. Access to joint accounts vanished. Shared property dissolved under scrutiny and court orders. Only the children remained. They took over her care without ceremony. Emmer reduced his course load to manage hospital logistics. Jasper navigated insurance battles and treatment options. Clara stepped into the role of coordinator, her schedule now shaped by medications, appointments, and managing emotions she didn't yet know how to name. Despite all that had transpired, they didn't leave her. In quiet moments, each of them had begun receiving anonymous messages. Typed letters, always brief, always steady. Notes about academic paths. Reminders of worth. encouragement to stay focused despite the storm. At first, they had ignored the coincidence. But over time, something familiar emerged. A tone, a rhythm, the same voice that had once signed permission slips and left notes in lunchboxes, now masked by deliberate anonymity. They didn't speak of it aloud, but each of them quietly began to suspect. When Clara placed one of the letters beside a new stack of college forms, she didn't say anything. She simply laid it down on the table between her and her brothers. For the first time in months, they sat together with no phones, no distractions. Just the unspoken realization that someone had always been there, just beyond reach, holding the net beneath their fall. With Lena's condition worsening and silence no longer bearable, they boarded a flight to Summit Falls. Nathan had not expected them. But when his assistant relayed the message that 3 young people were waiting, claiming to be his children, he didn't hesitate. He gave the only instruction that mattered: let them in. They entered his office quietly. No accusations, no demands, just presence. Emmer carried himself like a man shaped by both ambition and disappointment. Jasper remained calm but observant, absorbing the environment like a scientist stepping into a new lab. Clara moved last, more guarded than the others, but unmistakably resolute. They sat across from their father, no longer just the figure they had remembered from childhood, but now a man who had endured, adapted, and rebuilt. In the silence that followed, there were no rehearsed speeches or emotional apologies. There was only acknowledgement. Something had happened, something irreversible. But through it all, he had not let go. Over time, the details came out, not all at once, but through fragments. The financial collapse, the diagnosis, the betrayal by the man their mother had trusted. The unraveling of every plan she had once whispered into the future. Nathan listened. His expression didn't shift. He simply took in the weight of their words, and then began moving pieces into place. Arrangements were made for advanced treatment. Discreet transfers covered what insurance would not. Trusted contacts were called. Within days, the best specialists in the country were involved, quietly, professionally, without fanfare. No one needed to know who had made it happen. The children never asked. Later, Clara returned to the question that lingered between them. After everything their mother had done, why still help? Nathan offered no lecture. He simply made it clear, without needing to say it outright, that love was not measured in who deserved it. It was chosen, protected, and proven, especially when the world had stopped believing in it. And so, as Lena remained in her private care suite, unaware of who had truly made it possible, her children stood by her. And their father, from a quiet distance, stood by them. He never needed revenge. He had already won. The seasons shifted over Summit Falls, covering the peaks in soft white as winter crept quietly through the valley. At the Drake residence, the world moved at its own pace. There was no media presence, no public spectacle. Just a rhythm Nathan had cultivated over years. A life built on order, purpose, and peace. Back in Boston, chaos moved in contrast. Lena Blake's illness progressed faster than expected. The treatments, though administered by some of the best oncologists in the country, merely slowed the inevitable. Her social circle, once vibrant and expansive, had thinned into silence. Board positions were rescinded. Invitations dried up. The same people who had once praised her style, her events, her perfect family now kept a polite distance, their loyalty evaporating the moment her scandal became too inconvenient. Travis Shaw had vanished completely. Whispers suggested he had returned to Switzerland. Others claimed he was hiding from international investigations. It didn't matter. His absence said more than any excuse could. Lena was left to face the consequences of her choices alone. But it was the children who stayed, each for their own reasons. They visited daily. They adjusted their lives. They offered comfort, not out of obligation, but from something deeper, something shaped by resilience rather than affection. Despite everything, they still carried a quiet strength that even Lena, in her most lucid moments, couldn't deny. The public began to notice. Articles emerged, soft at first, about 3 exceptional students who had managed to rise above personal scandal. Emmer and Jasper earned awards at Princeton. Clara's acceptance into Yale made headlines in educational circles. Grants, fellowships, publication credits. Each achievement added a new thread to a story that no longer belonged to their mother or her mistakes. And behind it all, Nathan remained in the background, steady as ever. He didn't attend ceremonies or give interviews. He didn't publicly claim credit. But his influence was everywhere, in the stability of their education, the consistency of their support systems, the doors that opened quietly without explanation. He ensured their futures were protected, not just from the wreckage Lena had left behind, but from the weight of her legacy. In the legal world, the fallout continued. Don Harper's name surfaced in multiple inquiries. Documents once hidden were leaked. His accounting firm collapsed under pressure. Declan Hart, once feared in Boston's legal scene, faced disbarment proceedings. Every move they had made to help Lena strip Nathan of assets was now evidence. Clear, damning, irreversible. Investigations intensified. Subpoenas were served. Private correspondences reviewed. With each layer uncovered, the full extent of Lena's and Travis's betrayal became public knowledge. And still, Nathan did nothing. He issued no statement, gave no comment. The silence spoke louder than any defense ever could. In the hospital where Travis had once worked, whispers turned to judgment. An ethics committee convened. Cases were reopened. Evidence poured in. Eventually, the medical board made its decision. His license was suspended indefinitely. His research credentials revoked. Every title he had once flaunted was stripped. International charges followed. The public image he and Lena had built, so carefully, so selfishly, crumbled into dust. At a quiet gravesite in Mount Auburn Cemetery, Lena was laid to rest. The service was small. No press.
No speeches.
Only her children stood at her side, accompanied by a single figure standing apart in the distance. Nathan watched from the edge of the pathway, unseen, but not absent. He hadn't come for her. He came for them. Afterward, he returned to Summit Falls. He didn't linger in Boston. There was nothing left for him there. Only memories wrapped in performance, in carefully arranged smiles and hollow conversations. Now, his life moved forward with clarity. At the Pierce Health Institute, his work expanded. A new foundation launched quietly, focused on providing elite medical care to under-resourced children across the country.
No flashy branding.
Just results. The name was chosen by Clara, submitted anonymously through a scholarship essay she thought no one would ever read. The Truth Fund. Its mission echoed everything Nathan had come to believe. That legacy wasn't built by titles or bloodlines. It was built by what came after, by how you rebuild from the pieces, by what you choose to do in the silence left by destruction. His children continued to grow into that legacy. Emmer prepared for medical school, building on the curiosity Nathan had once seen in him as a child. Jasper's work in genetics gained international attention, driven by a desire to redefine what family truly meant. Clara, now a sophomore at Yale, published a piece in a prestigious legal journal, an essay on ethical recovery after betrayal. Their last name remained Drake. By choice. Nathan never asked them to keep it, but they did. He watched their lives unfold not with pride, but with a deep, quiet gratitude. They had been broken, tested, and abandoned, but never alone. And that was enough. Years passed. Not in dramatic waves, but in the quiet rhythms of a life rebuilt. Summit Falls transformed with the seasons, and within the stillness of the mountains, Nathan Drake shaped something far greater than reputation. He shaped legacy, not forged in courtrooms or media battles, but in the steady progression of his children's lives. Emmer Drake walked the halls of the same medical school where Nathan had once begun his journey. Though their names appeared side by side in academic archives, Emmer carved his own path, marked by published case studies and a quiet integrity that mirrored his father's. Jasper, now a postdoctoral fellow, built an entire research framework around the concept of chosen family. His findings disrupted conventional genetics discourse, blending science with lived experience in ways that challenged old paradigms. Clara found her voice through law. Her essay on restorative justice and family ethics became required reading in several Ivy League courses. She didn't speak publicly about what her family had endured. She let the work speak. And it did. They all carried the same last name, not because they were told to, but because they had chosen to. Not as a symbol of perfection, but as a declaration of loyalty to the parent who had never asked for thanks, only shown up in ways no one else could. The Pierce Health Institute became more than a clinic. It became a movement. Elite care with uncompromising ethics. Discretion, yes, but never at the expense of integrity. Patients came from around the world. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities. But also, children from shelters, survivors of systems built to forget them. Nathan made sure of that. Every successful procedure funded 3 more for someone who couldn't afford to hope. Back in Boston, the dust never fully settled. Travis Shaw was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, malpractice, and financial manipulation. The Swiss authorities sentenced him to 10 years with all assets seized. He was last seen in a state-run prison facility. His hands, once praised for precision, now reduced to labor tasks and empty routines. Lena's estate, contested by former partners and creditors, was drained of influence and value. Whatever remained passed directly to her children. But they wanted none of it. Her grave, simple and unadorned, received visits only from the 3 people she had underestimated most. They didn't come to grieve her choices. They came to close the chapter. One evening, in Summit Falls, Nathan hosted a quiet dinner. Not an occasion, not a celebration. Just a gathering. Emmer sat beside his wife, a pediatric surgeon who shared stories from her practice. Their young daughter colored at the corner of the table, half listening, half dreaming. Jasper, now working at Stanford, debated recent discoveries with his husband, a molecular biologist. Clara arrived last, fresh from a panel on legal reform, her fiancé at her side, a federal prosecutor with sharp instincts and a warm smile. There was no discussion of the past. No need. It lived with them, yes, but as foundation, not weight. Photographs lined the mantel, not of awards or headlines, but of milestones. Emmer in his white coat ceremony. Jasper presenting his first TED Talk. Clara holding her law school diploma. Nathan didn't need applause. The quiet confirmation of their strength was enough. In another part of the world, headlines flickered briefly across international news. Former Boston surgeon denied early parole. Court reopens case tied to misappropriated medical funds. Travis Shaw's name, once spoken with admiration in elite circles, now appeared only in footnotes. His story was not one of redemption, but of decay. Nathan never commented, never answered the journalists who continued to request interviews. What was there to say? The truth had already spoken. Later that night, after his children had gone, after the house returned to stillness, Nathan walked into his study, the same one where he had rebuilt his life decades earlier. On the wall above his desk hung a single framed note, the same one he had left on the kitchen table the morning he walked away. The truth reveals itself eventually. He stood before it not to reflect, but to acknowledge that it had been right. The betrayal, the collapse, the loss, they had been necessary cuts, removing what was diseased and false. What remained had healed stronger than before. This was not revenge. It was something far more lasting. It was legacy, chosen every day, written not in blood or inheritance, but in the quiet decision to keep showing up, even when no one noticed. The story didn't end with destruction. It ended with choice, and that choice had made all the difference.